Welcome to another Close Assault, Episode 1, Getting into ASL. We're going to cover what sections, what we first read when we entered ASL. Then we head on to learning ASL in today's world, resources available to all ASL players, and discussing the importance of mentors for each and every player, regardless of skill level. And we also cover the pitfalls of staying into SK too long before transitioning into ASL. Let's get to the discussion. When I picked up ASL, I believe the first section I read, because I'm a visual type of person and more geographical minded, I honestly read chapter B first. I didn't crack A open, didn't crack D open. I liked the pictures they showed of the terrain in B, and that just kind of captivated me, and it was a much easier read, not really too technical. You know, I understood some dice roll modifiers from the old squad leader system. So the read was actually pretty simple for me. So the chapter B was my number one read. What about you, Pete?
I started off with chapter J, of all things. And it wasn't because I was interested in the deluxe as such. I was actually reading the painting micro armor guide. That's what I read first.
Oh, that's crazy.
Because I come from a miniatures background. So I've always been a miniatures player first. The second chapter was chapter 8. And then, like you, I went to chapter B. I already figured I knew most of chapter A, and C and D weren't going to be really that difficult because I already had played squad leader through GI. So the core processes were going to be familiar.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was the terrain. And the pretty pictures, Kibler's pretty pictures.
Oh, yeah, those are just gorgeous. I mean, some of the best pictures I like are just when it has like a tank track, the tiger, the open ground hex, and shell holes and things like that. Those are absolutely gorgeous. I actually wish I had like a whole photo wall of that stuff. So
yeah.
So
yeah.
So what do you think about today Edge? I mean, the paths that the newer player has today obviously are completely different than what we have when we entered the game. We started with squad leader. It kept changing and evolving. But today, they have the straight up rule book. They've got the pocket rule book, and they've got starter kit. So entry to ASL is very uniquely different. Plus, the availability of players is not even close to the type of players that we had available or particularly unavailable in the past. You pretty much had to play your brother or yourself or whatever. But today, no reason to play just one person. What do you think about the SK and the new paths? Are there anything different or really unique other than that, other than those cases?
No, I think the fact that we now have, when I started playing ASL, the internet, it was pre-internet. So being able to play online, full stop, which is as close to face-to-face ASL in terms of visual experience as you can get without actually physical counters, is such a difference. And the fact is you've got an online community that operates 24/7. There's always someone around willing to talk ASL. I think we have a more active, available community.
Yeah, and from different backgrounds as well. I mean, you've got American players, you've got European players, and you've got the Asia contingents and the New Zealanders, Australians as well as the other countries. And so even hooking up with those particular players, albeit time zone differences, you're going to experience different gameplay based on the different players you're going to actually encounter during the ASL ventures and the Valzal and so forth.
Yeah, I think the biggest help now is that you're not just constrained to ASL rulebook plus paratrooper plus Beyond Valor. You've got the starter kit as a very good option to start to introduce. It basically is the modern day version of squad leader without the programmed instruction, but a simplified way of getting into the whole system.
And that brings up another point where when we started into the system, we had to wait for Yanks to come out. We had to wait for Paratrooper, to be available. We had to wait for Partisan. We had to wait for all these modules to come out where, yeah, the availability problem is now, but you could actually buy someone's whole collection. If you wanted to go, high on the hog just to buy a full collection, you could really get everything in one shot, where that really was, that's another big change to it as well. If you just wanted to play the Brits, you could simply buy someone's collection and go for the Brits and things like that. So you pretty much can get it all in one shot if you're lucky enough.
It seems amazing in hindsight that it was only 5 years, or 5 or 6 years between the release of the rulebook and the release of Code of Bushido.
Wow.
I.e. the Japanese. It felt like 20 years at the time.
Yep.
For me, it was an incredibly long wait between. I knew things were getting released because I'd see them in the Avalon Hill General. When we got the Avalon Hill General, it was usually 6 or 9 months after the US it was actually published.
Yeah. Yep.
But the ASL stuff wouldn't get there for 12 months afterwards, and and that was after we found out about it in the pages of the General.
Well, which is really interesting. Again, so talking about the different times, we can buy most of the journals, all the annuals, and a lot of the generals from ASL for ASL and Squad Leader. Those are pretty much readily available for all intents and purposes. So if I'm just starting, and let's say I don't have any experience in any tactical play, or ASL's is beyond my reach, whether monetarily or initial interest, SK is obviously the choice to make. You really can go into SK and really pursue your interest in tactical gaming at that point. So, do I just start with the first one? Do I skip something? What do you suggest for me if I'm a brand new player? What am I looking for? I'm interested in ASL. I want to make that big jump, but I don't want to drop $600 to $800 on a collection. I've got $100 in my pocket. What am I looking at, Pete?
Well, if you're going to be making the jump to ASL, and that's what we're assuming in this podcast, is that you're looking to get into ASL, I would recommend that you get ASL Starter Kit 1 and at least 3. But I'm actually going to say that you get 1, 2, and 3. If you decide that the game is not for you after all that, you can always sell those on. You should get them when they're available. If they're all available, grab them all. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. One, I actually think it's easier to learn the different sections. So Starter Kit 1 deals with infantry.
Mm-hmm.
Starter Kit 2 deals with guns, anti-tank guns, artillery pieces, that sort of thing. So those are 2 different areas that you are going to need to learn,
right.
And it's easier to learn them separately.
In place weapons that pretty much fire.
Yeah. Starter Kit 3 brings in vehicles and the complication and the complexity that is vehicle movement. Now, if you already have learned how to fire guns, cannons, and things like that, then you've already got a grasp on how to perform the firing action for vehicles. Now you're looking at the complexities of moving vehicles and how that movement impacts the firing procedure that you've already learned.
Right.
So that's why I would say 3 different things.
And it kind of rolls the guns, because the guns are pretty much just firing on the infantry target type or area target type. But now, once you add those vehicles into them, your essentially Starter Kit 2 knowledge will be increased by adding the vehicular target type, and therefore all the extra modifiers that are necessary to learn in order to combat and having a very successful game at that point.
Yeah, I also think that there is a potentially you can get information overload by just going from 1 straight to 3.
Right.
Because you're actually basically adding in all of Starter Kit 2.
You get familiar with covert arc changes, even though they might be dealing with guns. It's just a slightly different curve just to add the vehicles in. Actually, it's easier to hit with the vehicles. So starting with the guns, you have no limitations of covered arc. You have all those concepts that add into vehicles. Pretty much the vehicles are just moving guns, for all honesty, you know.
Now, the other reason I would suggest getting all three is because if you want to move to ASL at that point after playing all three, that actually gives you a really good set of core ASL components, you know, various nationalities. So, and there are a lot of scenarios featuring those other nationalities that aren't in Beyond Valor available from the MMP website.
That's true. You could hold, and from other magazines they have to download, things like that. Yeah, the number of nationalities is really pretty high.
But about to do a fair amount of scenarios that are in either the annuals or the journals or online from MMP, is that you start picking up the journals.
Yeah, they add a lot of extra information, a lot of good reading in the journals as well.
There's some very good articles that will help you. There's some examples of play, why the rule was designed like that, but how it works. That's important.
Yeah,
you can go down a rabbit hole of why a rule is designed. Concentrate on the game.
It kind of rolls into the fact that, you know, so I'm learning ASL 1. I get some infantry down. You know, a lot of guys will play solo. They need to feel more comfortable, you know, before they start their first games. You know, when I started playing even squad leader, you don't have to learn all the rules down to the T to be able to enjoy the game, to progress through the game, to learn to go into starter kit 2, starter kit 3, or even ASL. And I think one thing that might be a hurdle for some players is that they think that they need to, even though the rule book is much smaller than the ASL rulebook, they might think that, well, it's so small, before I transition, I need to know everything in here like the back of my hand before I go into that monstrosity of a rulebook, which most of it you actually don't even use. So I think that avenue is fine to want to know all the rules, but that's not necessary for you to know all the rules when you transition. And one way to kind of get used to rules popping up, and let's say you might have a couple rules in your mind, there's, you know, recently with the current events, there's a lot of online tournaments, there's a lot of online communities where you can get together with people, practice your skills, practice your knowledge of SK, and get your technique or the execution of particular rules down, because everyone will play it slightly differently. Everyone has a tendency to have, you know, a slightly different take on how a rule is executed, but yet they know kind of the rule by itself. How do I fire? How do I, if I do the cower, what happens here? The execution of those is what you're looking to refine. You know the rule, but now you just want to bounce that rule of the players, and you could do that through SK online tournaments, which are a great learning device, as long as you have a cordial opponent that you can bounce ideas off of, play through the game, and access the rulebook properly, which is a big part of it. After my first few games, what are we looking at in terms of, okay, should I start with like a brand new player? Like, what happens if I only have me and my buddy that are both learning ASL together? Should I pull that up, or should I, you know, should we both go online? Since obviously, you know, the present day, there's a lot of ASL communities out there. There's starter kit communities. There's ASL skills on Discord. There's the ASL Facebook group, SK Facebook group, and there's, you know, Game Squad, and there's a number of ASL communities out there that you can easily get a hold of in terms of trying to get somebody else. Should I start with my buddy, or should I incorporate something else in the learning process?
Oh, I think people would be better served trying to find someone who's experienced with ASL or experienced with starter kit, help them learn how to play. Not so much this tactical side of things, but just to learn how the game works and and to explain the rules to them. I think too often we see players playing just amongst themselves, making the same mistakes and not actually advancing their knowledge of the rules. And when they play people with greater experience, all of a sudden they find out they've been playing the rules completely wrongly. And it's very frustrating for them, and it can be frustrating for the person working with them.
Right. But that's very common. I mean, I learned, I mean, I've been playing ASL for a while, and I continue to learn rules simply because that's just the process. The process is playing an experienced game, a very old game. It's been around, it's been changed a lot, but there's always something you're going to miss. I mean, don't feel that, oh, I screwed that up completely, I look like really silly, whereas that's not the case whatsoever. As long as you can take your learning to the next level, that's fine to make those fundamental mistakes. As long as you take what you learn from one game, learn one thing from each game you play, take that to the next game, and in 10 games down the line, you've mastered a certain concept, or your focus, your confidence is going to be so much stronger by just asking simple questions and understanding that you may be playing a rule wrong for a long time, but know that, you know, people, you will experience some people that will say, oh, no, it's actually this way. And then you say, oh, okay, that's really odd, because my buddy and I were really discussing how that worked, and we just kind of did this, that sort of thing.
I actually think that we get into this trap of thinking that we can master ASL. No, you can understand ASL.
Right.
You understand the rules, but you're not going to master the rule book. Very few people have actually done that. What you do is you increase your understanding in terms of accuracy of the rules and from experience. And that's why I think having that mentor to help you through that initial exposure to the rules and how they work together, and introducing concepts that are between ASL and starter kit are significantly changed.
Correct.
And the other thing is with SK is I don't think there's any benefit in constantly replaying one scenario. There's a reason they give you multiple scenarios in each starter kit. The idea, I think that all you need to do with starter kit is play each scenario once as either side, so you get exposure to different approaches within a game to attack and defend.
Yeah, one attacker, one defender. You get used to both sides.
Yeah. Different nationality characteristics, because that is what ASL, the flavor of ASL is so dependent on. If you're constantly playing one scenario out over and over again, you're not actually learning the rules per se. You're learning how to win at that scenario.
Right. Very, very truncated view. With ASL is not that. Every scenario is a different game into itself, using the same fundamental rules, but it's a different game. Victory conditions, OB, who you're playing half the time. So the game changes every single time you play it, which is the beauty of it.
And the other thing is, once you've got that mentor, is you then learn to go out and not be so afraid of playing other people. But if you've got a solid understanding of the core basics, then you are more likely to find that your games with other people, by exposure to differing approaches in terms of
techniques and stuff like that,
tactics and things like that, will actually benefit you, because the more opponents you face, the more your level of understanding of the wider game becomes.
Right. So if I have a mentor, does that, I think the mentor is good. The mentor will sit you down, essentially explain things as you are attempting to do them. Let's say you want to jump across the street like they have in many tutorials. You want to attack across the street. A good mentor will be able to show you all the different approaches that you can take to attacking across the street, instead of just saying, "Oh, just do this." So the different methods that you used, whether, instead of attacking, instead of prep firing, maybe move first and move around him and maybe draw his fire. Let's see what happens when that happens.
So your mentor would be looking at showing you the options available to you, and then how to use them, and what the potential consequences are.
Yeah, for each one, absolutely.
The mentor would always leave the choice to you, right? It's more a point of, are you sure? Sometimes there's a case where you try and do something with your mentor. He said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And the correct response is yes.
Hell yes.
No. It's not. No. It's why. Why wouldn't I want to do that? What are the consequences?
Right.
And then sooner, and if you're playing with someone who's capable guiding you through that process, and not everyone is, I'm certainly not. I have the utmost admiration for people like John Knowles and others who teach ASL via starter kit. They're able to explain the consequences to the point where they no longer have to ask the mentor, why wouldn't this work? They think about it themselves.
And as long as they know the consequences, like, so what if I'm going to take 3-2 shots in the open? Maybe that's what I want to do because that's my game plan. It may not be the most efficient, most effective. It may not be exactly what a typical person might do. But if my plan, after my understanding of the system increases, my plan might actually be to cause casualties on my side, again, for whatever reason. But just to know that you always don't have to be safe all the time. So, and that kind of goes in with the next thing is what you have to do is, during play, even when you don't play with your mentor and he's teaching you and things like that, every single game of ASL will typically have 2 to 5 rules dives. So in that sort of situation, when you pick up your starter kit 1, 2, and or 3, first of all, download most updated rules from MMP's website. It's starter kit 4. They will have some Japanese rules in there. Cross that stuff out, X that stuff out. You don't need that. And when you get it printed out, read through the sections that you're covering. Say if it's just ASL starter kit 1, right? When you come against concepts that you make sure you remember, highlight those sections. Print it out, highlight those sections, because it's very difficult. Just like as an ASL rulebook, sometimes it's difficult to find that one rule that you're looking for. And if you highlight it, it'll pop to mind easier. You'll find it sooner when you're looking through the rule book, and your gameplay will become faster because, oh yeah, I remember highlighting that. That's like about page 4 or 5. I kind of know where that is. Boom, boom, boom. You get to the page, it's highlighted for you. The rules example, the rules question is defined, and you go for it. And then talk to your opponent first. Say, hey, how do you think this is done? And if there's any sort of doubt, flip the rule book open, look for your highlighted sites. And if you still have a debate upon it, again, something that we didn't have in the past is online help. You go on Facebook, you go on any of the forums, you'll probably get an answer within about 5 minutes, to be honest with you.
Just be aware, though, when you're asking that, you shouldn't have a sense of entitlement that your question will be answered quickly.
Right.
If people answer these questions on a voluntary basis, there should be no expectation that the community is just.
It's not obligated. Yeah, not obligated to answer questions.
There's no obligation incurred.
And also
So
note
don't get pissy just because someone took 10 minutes or didn't see your question for 30 minutes and took 5 minutes to answer it.
Right. And also note that, just as anyone else is, likely you're just looking for another opinion, and they are just simply that. There are going to be some opinions that are incorrect. No big deal. Everyone gets things incorrect. And that's the part of the thing that I think is the biggest takeaway over asking rules is about half the people will get the answer, quote, right, half the people will get it wrong. But as long as you're understanding and growing from that, as long as you're finding the answer, okay, why is it this over that? And then what they do is reference the rule sections. And when you pose questions, please reference the rule sections, because that'll help everyone else to know exactly what you're looking at and give a detailed example of what you're going through. Don't just say, my guy moved over here and he got shot, and what happens then? It's a non-question. It needs to be detailed. Kind of follow the rule book. It needs detail. Were you in open ground? What shot at you? What phase is it? The whole 9 yards. go into all the detail. Therefore, your answer will be much closer or representative of your situation. And if you can provide a picture, give a picture.
An illustration in this case is worth more than 1,000 words of explanation of context.
Right.
We can see the situation as it would be on the mat board. It's a lot easier to A, provide an answer that is relevant, and B, not drift off track.
Right. So after play my 15, 20 games, Pete, I've got the basic functions down. I know how to attack, I know how to prep fire. I know what cowering means. I know how to route for the most part. I know what happens in first fire and subsequent first fire. At what point can I make that transition? Should I continue playing ASL, SK, get all the expansion packs, get everything else, decisions? Should I really hammer down and get all that stuff before I want to make the transition to ASL? When is the time? Obviously, time is different for each person, but when's the quote sweet spot into changing over and trying some ASL games? Where's that sweet spot?
Okay, well, personally, I don't believe that you need to go past 1, 2, or 3. If you're already if you are going in, and this is the thing, we're still considering that people are using SK because they want to go to ASL, which is what SK was originally designed for.
Right.
So the expansion packs, the bonus pack, they're not necessary. They're nice to have, but you're actually probably better off, particularly with SK 1 through 3. Once you've played 15, 20 games and you feel that you're ready or that you'd like to try ASL, that's the time to move.
Right.
Because routing, there are far more options for movement, and defensive fire opportunities are quite significantly more varied, and you've got more options on the attack, and routing is a little bit different. There are more conditions with routing that can be affected, and you've also got the big ones, concealment,
right,
and snipers.
And movement, you've got the bypass and all the other rules that come with it.
Yeah,
but those rules, in all actuality, those rules aren't too difficult to overcome. I think those rule sections are pretty much laid out almost in stone, to be honest with you. I really don't have problems. I reference those sections all the time, and I think a lot of ASL players does. I mean, it's played in every single game of ASL, but everyone still continues to reference those sections, and that's the takeaway, is that even you might go to a tournament. I might be a new SK player going to a tournament, and I see 20, 30, 40, 50 ASLers sitting down, busting their dice out and their giant towers and their huge counter conglomeration of dice trays and counter trays. But these guys still access the rulebook constantly accessing the rulebook. But they've got,
I wouldn't say constantly. I would say regularly.
Yeah, at least once a game. I mean, if you're not accessing once a game, and that's what I mean by constant.
They're not constantly glued to the pages.
Yeah, otherwise, the games have never been done. They're all being adjudicated.
No, that's when you're first starting an SK, for example.
Right.
You tend to play while you're reading the rulebook.
Right.
If you're trying to learn the game on your own, which not recommended, not at all recommended.
No, you really need that other person there.
After about 15 to 20 games, you're ready to move on, because the longer you wait, the more difficult it will be to understand the expanded concepts in ASL. Right. And it's just like when an ASL player of some experience tries to play SK for the first few times. It's actually really difficult for them, because they actually have to unlearn rules and techniques and tactical precepts that they've learned in ASL that don't apply in SK.
Right. I found that firsthand. I was going down, you have ASL players, they don't even know what's not included in SK, most of them. If they're not familiar with SK, they have no clue what's not taken away from the gameplay. And they certainly don't understand the differences in terms of what you can be able to do and how the subtleties of SK differ from the ASL game. And those subtleties, I think the more you play SK, and it's fine to stick with SK if that's your deal, but if you, this is a podcast of moving into ASL. If you want to move into ASL, I think the longer you are in the SK realm, the more you're going to get used to all the techniques that are in the SK realm that you'll be learning like the back of your hand, which you'll have to unlearn very similarly, like you said, as the ASL player has to unlearn what he does or what he knows going to the SK level. So it's the same unlearning technique, and because they are so similar, that will cause some issues in some of your games. You might get frustrated a couple times here and there. So again, as long as you're familiar with the basic precepts of firing, moving, understanding victory conditions and things like that, then I think you'll be just fine and dandy to move on. But again, what's the primary prerequisite of moving on, Pete?
Well, you need to actually have someone who is experienced to guide you.
Right, a good mentor. Everyone needs a good mentor. I mean, even we have mentors. I mean, there's some people that we look to right now. Say, hey, I don't understand this concept. I'll call up Pete. Say, hey, Pete, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Yeah.
You're asking me a hypothetical question again.
And I'll say, you're full of shit. There's no way. And then I'll be wrong. And then we learn.
Just as a personal example, I've been playing. I basically learned ASL through the help of my friend John. We've been playing now for 30 odd years, or longer than that. Now, John's always been my mentor in terms of rules. In fact, I'm one of those horrible people who was so lazy, I relied on the other person to read the rules.
Oh.
I didn't read the rules really, and I hate to say this, until about 2005, when I got guilt-tripped into reading them. Now, I was really lucky. I had opponents who stuck with me all that time.
So
yes, I sort of had read the rules. I'd read the rules enough to sort of get by and play by mail games and from 1996 and a few play by email games. But basically, I used to play by email games to learn how to read the rule.
That's true, because you'll have the opportunity to read the rules all the time. Yeah. So now let's say I've decided I'm going to make the jump. I've got my ASL rulebook because it's in print now, or I can get the pocket rulebook, or I can get it online from eBay for some guy getting rid of his stuff. Mm-hmm. What about the other stuff that's nothing's available? I mean, that's the biggest complaint, is nothing's available. Do I really need everything? I mean, literally, do I need everything? What could keep me going for quite some time?
If you can't get hold of the big rulebook with all the charts and everything, get the pocket rulebook. Then get a copy of Lefranc-Therese or LFT's rack charts.
Yep.
Okay. They're really portable and really useful during the game, because I'll tell you now, the big charts from the big fat rulebook, they're unwieldy and they take up table space.
Oh.
Okay. And seriously, they're too nice to actually be using it all the time.
I've actually got them in a wire bound. I've converted some of them to a wire bound.
So there's that. You absolutely must have a copy of the relevant Chapter H notes.
Right.
If you've got vehicles. So you do need the big rule book, really, because it comes with the German and Russian.
Right. The pocket rule book would be something that you would probably, if you're desperate now and you don't really want to play with a lot of armor, then the pocket rule book is good to go. Or maybe your buddy's got Chapter H. You don't really need Chapter H. But if you want to get into it, your mentor's got you going, set you on the right path, and you want to start off, a couple games by some random guys online. Chapter H is, it's really important to have. So it's you got to pick up that main rule book for sure. So if I want to get to certain things like your Beyond Value, even
things go out of print.
Yeah, things go out of print, and if you get the older stuff,
you can always buy. There's always usually first edition stuff, the stuff that was originally printed by Avalon Hill,
right,
or previous editions that have been superseded, and not through because they're obsolete, but because the current MMP editions are so jam-packed of goodies,
right,
that they're incredible value. But things like, if you can't get a hold of Rising Sun, Well,
Yeah,
get Kota Bushido.
Kota Bushido and
You will
Gung Ho are usually
Well, I
available
mean,
out there, and for about
yeah.
half the price.
Yeah, you can still buy. Generally, you can still find that the mat boards are individually available from MMP.
Like you say, the starter kit style boards are readily available. They're pretty much used everywhere, and they're cleaner looking maps. Art's been updated, and
they're a bit digital in some aspects, but they're they're consistent too. You don't have different shades of ground level green.
Right, and you can store a whole heck of a lot. I mean, when you pick up your Beyond Valor and your Yanks, I think each of those packs comes with like 10 boards each, and like 40 scenarios each. So I think what we're kind of just deciding is Beyond Valor, Yanks, and maybe Kota Bushido if you want to get further down the line. But Beyond Valor and Yanks will set you good for easily 2.5 to 3 years of play, straight up.
Okay, that's a US perspective, but talking about the rest of the world, Beyond Valor, Kota Bushido, and For King and Country.
Right, but Kota Bushido, we're talking, that's...
Oh, sorry, Rising Sun.
Well, Rising Sun, Rising Sun, I would get the Kota Bushido because Rising Sun never going to be available again, to be honest. It's pretty pricey, but if you wanted to do the Japanese, Kota Bushido is out there. If you want to spend the money on the big boys, then you
don't need gung ho if you just want to play Japanese,
right?
And if you do get hold of West of Alamein, and some people do, so don't worry about the fact. In fact, you're on a winner there because you've now got the desert rules,
right,
and the desert map board, and a lot of active current players do not have West of Alamein.
Right,
they've got For King and Country, which is basically Italy, the Pacific, and Europe. And doesn't have desert.
And if you're worried about not having all the scenarios that comes with the packs, well, again, you've got the annual magazines, the journals that will have plenty of Japanese action for you.
Oh, there's plenty available as well on the MMP website. You may even find, if you're going down that road, and I would recommend you make sure that you've got ASL, the core, just like you did with Starter Kit, you get the core concepts of chapters A through D down.
Yep.
Don't rush into Pacific. It is significantly different. It is significantly more complex in some aspects.
The game changes when you go to the Pacific. The game actually just changes in the Pacific.
Yeah, and jungle is a really different mindset. And the Japanese are a much different force to use, and definitely when faced by them.
So getting an ASL starter kits is pretty much the way to go nowadays. It's 1, 2, and 3. They're cheap enough. And again, once you get out of starter kit and you've got your ASL rulebook, guess what? You can either keep your starter kit stuff or sell it to buy your ASL rulebook. And then you can always sell it for just about what you paid for it anyway. You'll never have a problem in doing that. Start your ASL road to, victories on that sort of thing. And Beyond Valor, obviously, your core modules are available for the most part. If not, someone will be selling them individually every once in a while, and you'll be able to pick them up for a reasonable price. But again, if you get that Beyond Valor, you're going to be busy for quite some time. Save up your money in case, even if it doesn't come out, save up $20 a month. By the end of the year, you could pick up Rising Sun. That's pretty simple.
And to be honest, if you play every scenario as both sides from the modern version of Beyond Valor, that's 80 games.
Yeah, that's a lot of squad
and
here.
You've covered a lot.
That is a lot of squad here.
And you will be really well grounded. And I'll tell you what, there's no cookie cutter scenarios in Beyond Valor.
No.
They're all quite different. They're all pretty varied, and they deal from 1939 all the way to 1945.
And again, just to reiterate, simply because you're jumping into the Beyond Valor where you're going to be adding new and exciting new things into your gameplay, maintain that relationship that you have with your mentor, because you're going to be coming across stuff, a lot more scenarios, special rules Some of them don't make any sense. Ask questions. Ask your opponent, what the hell does this mean? And then ask your mentor if he's around, not playing the game with you. But use all
just
your
ask
resources
the
available for
community.
you. Yeah.
Look, if you say, look, can someone? I'm not understanding how this works. There's no shame in asking for help. People are quite prepared to actually explain how something works. In fact, I think they're actually more prepared online to explain how that works than to basically interpret a rule, or find a rule for you.
Yeah. And even if their explanation isn't 100% correct, they'll put you on the path.
Yeah.
Let's say you understand 20% of a rule. They may explain the extra 60%, and you're still missing 20% of the rule overall. Who cares?
Don't sweat it. Don't sweat it.
Just go play the game. You know 60% more than what you did before. And then
actually that missing 20% is probably going to be covered by you actually playing.
Right.
And pushing the pieces around.
Right.
Because there is no substitute for play in terms of practical embedding of how the rules work.
Right.
The more you play, the more you understand the rules.
And the number one thing to take away is the rules is not a guideline of how to play the game. It's actually just a roadmap. It's just a set of reference book. Playing the game, applying the rules. You won't find that in the rule book. You need to get on the board, shoving counters, making morale checks, rolling snake eyes to make all this stuff come together. After your first 5, 6, 7 games at ASL, so many things will click into place far faster than reading the rule book 100 times would be.
And with the illustrated examples in the rulebook, punch out your counters, bring out your maps, move the counters around according to the examples.
Right.
By doing, you're learning.
Right. And by learning, you're just becoming a better ASL player, because every ASL player, again, cracks the rulebook, learns a little bit more from day after day, game after game, opponent after opponent. So, all right, Pete, thanks a lot for joining me on this initial session of getting into ASL. I think we covered a lot of ground, and everyone takes a slightly different route, but I think got to follow the main freeway before you take your side routes to get to your destination. Thanks for listening, guys, and learn from all your games.
Ciao.